Why does one loss seem to change everything in the UFC? Fighters go from looking untouchable to suddenly being questioned, even if their skills haven't really changed. Like a single moment, a knockout, a submission, or even a close decision can shift how a fighter is viewed, how they fight, and how others approach them. At this level, the difference between winning and losing is often small, but the consequences are not. That first loss doesn't just affect the record, it changes the entire environment around a fighter, from confidence and strategy to perception and opportunity. Now, let's get in for the juicy part. Why losing once changes everything. In the UFC, a single loss can shift a fighter's career in ways that go far beyond the result itself. It's not just about a mark on the record, it changes perception, confidence, strategy, and even how future opponents approach the fight. Before a loss, a fighter can feel untouchable. After it, everything becomes more uncertain. The difference is not always physical, it is often psychological, strategic, and narrative driven. The illusion of invincibility. Before a fighter loses, there is often a sense that they cannot be beaten. This is especially true for champions or undefeated fighters. Khabib Nurmagomedov never experienced this shift, which is part of why his aura remained intact. But for most fighters, that first loss removes the idea that they are unbeatable. Israel Adesanya, before losing to Alex Pereira, carried a level of confidence that came from consistent success. Once that loss happened, even though he later won the rematch, the perception changed. Opponents now knew he could be hurt and finished. This factor connects to the opponent belief. A loss does not just affect the fighter, it affects everyone else in the division. Before the loss, opponents may fight cautiously, respecting the champion's strengths. After the loss, they approach with more confidence. Leon Edwards knocking out Kamaru Usman is a clear example. Usman had built a long streak of dominance, but after that moment, the way opponents viewed him changed. The same fighter with the same skills suddenly became more beatable in the eyes of others. This leads us to game plan exposure. Every loss reveals something. It shows a weakness, a pattern, or a limitation that others can study and exploit in their favor. When Alexander Volkanovski lost to Ilya Topuria, it highlighted moments where he could be caught in exchanges. That does not erase his skill, but it gives future opponents a clearer direction. Fighters and coaches analyze these moments in detail, building strategies around what has already been proven possible. Now, on the fighter's side, he has to deal with confidence shifts. Confidence in fighting is not just about belief, it affects the decision making. Fighters who have never lost often act with more certainty. They commit to actions without hesitation. After a loss, even a small doubt can change how a fighter performs. Tony Ferguson is a prime example of this. Once a fearless fighter started second guessing and questioning his moves. This does not always mean they become worse, but it can make them more cautious. That caution can reduce the effectiveness of their style, especially for fighters who rely on aggression or timing. This links to the adjustment phase. Some fighters respond to a loss by evolving, while others struggle to adapt. Islam Makhachev, after his early knockout loss by Adriano Martins in his first UFC fight of his career, improved his striking and overall game, becoming more complete over time. Of course, there are variables like age, experience, and number of fights, making it easier or harder for a fighter to adapt or adjust to these losses. In contrast, some fighters try to fix too many things at once, losing what made them effective in the first place. The ability to adjust correctly determines whether a loss becomes a turning point, like for Islam Makhachev, or the start of decline, like Tony Ferguson. Another factor is the narrative change. The story around a fighter shifts immediately after a loss. Before they may be seen as dominant or untouchable, after the focus often moves to their flaws. This narrative influences how fights are promoted, how analysts talk about them, and how fans perceive them. Conor McGregor's early career was built on momentum and dominance, but after losses, the narrative became more about inconsistency and decline, even when his skills remained dangerous. Another factor is division reaction. A clear example of this is Ronda Rousey losing to Holly Holm. Before that knockout, Ronda was arguably the best women's mixed martial artist and had cleaned out the division and was looking nearly unbeatable. Fighters approached her cautiously, often fighting not to lose rather than to win, but Holly completely saw through Rousey fraudulent striking and went in for the knockout. The same thing happened when Amanda Nunes lost to Juliana Pena. Nunes had dominated for years, but after that loss, the aura disappeared and fighters in both divisions began to believe the gap was not as large as it once seemed. Rematch dynamics is also really important to define these moments. The Stipe Miocic versus Daniel Cormier trilogy is one of the clearest examples of how a loss reshapes a fighter's approach. In their first fight, Cormier knocked out Miocic, exploiting openings in close range and controlling key exchanges. Going into the rematch, Miocic made a very specific adjustment. Instead of focusing only on head strikes, he consistently targeted the body, especially in the clinch, wearing Cormier down over time. That change completely shifted the fight. The loss gave Miocic a clear understanding of where he was vulnerable and what needed to change, while Cormier entered with confidence from the first win. By the later rounds, the dynamic had flipped and Miocic secured the finish. In the third fight, both fighters adjusted again, but the impact of that first loss was still present in how Miocic approached distance, pacing, and damage. It shows how a loss does not just affect the result, but rewrites the strategy and structure of future fights. This links to mental resilience. While fighters like Islam Makhachev lose once and instantly become to fix mistakes right away, other fighters need more than that. Michael Bisping is one of the strongest examples of this. For years, he was seen as a solid contender who fell short against elite opponents, taking losses that seemed to define his ceiling. But instead of fading, he stayed consistent, kept improving, and remained active in the division. When the opportunity finally came on short notice against Luke Rockhold, he stepped in and knocked him out to become champion. That moment was not just about skill, but about persistence and belief after setbacks. On the other side, fighters like Johnny Walker showed flashes of brilliance early, but after setbacks and losses, his performances became more cautious and less explosive, showing how confidence can shift in the opposite direction. And lastly, but not less important, we have the illusion of before and after. Anderson Silva is a clear example of how perception changes. Before losing to Chris Weidman, he looked completely dominant, controlling fights with precision, confidence, and creativity that made him seem far ahead of everyone else. After that loss, and especially the rematch, the perception shifted dramatically. His skills did not disappear, but the aura of invincibility was gone, and the risks in his style became more visible. A similar pattern can be seen with Chris Weidman after his losses to Luke Rockhold and Yoel Romero. Before, he was seen as a dominant champion who defeated Anderson Silva. After, he was viewed through a more critical lens where weaknesses that were always there became more apparent. Summarize all this at the highest level, a single loss doesn't just change a record, it reshapes everything around a fighter. It reveals limits, shifts confidence, and changes how both opponents and fans see them. What once looked like dominance becomes more conditional, and what felt permanent starts to look temporary. That's what makes the UFC so unpredictable. No one stays untouchable forever, and every moment matters more than it seems. If you enjoyed this kind of breakdown and want more deep dives like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel.